Thank you that you are giving us some time, and we want to hear from you about the history of Usul al-Fiqh. We know that you have done PhD on the missing link of Usul al-Fiqh. We want to know from you that from your research and being a professor at Istanbul University, what is the impact of Shafi Mustalaha, which is Risala written by Imam Shafi? What is the impact on the later Hanafis? What is the difference between the earlier usuls of Hanafi and the later usuls of Hanafi, especially Indian subcontinent Hanafi? How were they impacted? How it is different from original Hanafis and the new Hanafis? And how it can be reconciliated? What can be done? And what is the way forward for the Muslim Ummah to reshape and reshaping the Usul al-Fiqh following the earlier generations?
Okay, in my dissertation I focused the gap period in the history of Usul al-Fiqh between Shafi and Al-Jassas. Jassas is a Hanafi scholar who died in 370 after Hijrah. And in my dissertation I also traced back the traditionalization, so-called traditionalization of Hanafis. And what I discovered is Hanafis had a distinct way of critiquing narrations, prophetic narrations or mawquf narrations, narrations that go back to Sahaba, the companions. And in their critique, they did not submit the critiques of Ahl Hadith. As you know, they actually represent the Ahl Ray during that time, and they did accept the filtering of Hadith based on Sanad, but they did not see it enough. They did not see it sufficient. Hanafis. But Shafi'i, as a member of Ahl Hadith, but also who were interactions with Ahl Ray during his time in Iraq, for example. He also studied with, let's not say studied, but he was a colleague of Shaybani during his time in Kufa. And also he was debating with the members of Ahl Ray during his time. And Shafi, what he was trying to do in Al-Risala and his other works, for example, Jima' al-Ilm or Kitab al-Umm, he was trying to change what is the meaning of Sunnah, because until his time, both main schools of Medina and schools of Kufa, they both claim that solitary reports do not necessarily establish Sunnah.
Right.
For example, Malikis, we call them Malikis later. During that time, Ahl Medina, they understand Sunnah as a way of a kind of living practice that continued through the practice of Medina. So if a solitary report in contradiction with the practice of Ahl Medina, they just refuse it without any question. And Ahl Ray, so-called later Hanafis, they also had a distinct way to approach prophetic hadith or prophetic narrations, solitary reports. They accepted solitary reports, but they did not see themselves bound by solitary reports.
Right. So you mean Qabr Wahid or Ahad Hadith?
Yes, Ahad Hadith. So they used them as proofs, for example, but in many occasions they just refused these reports in favor of what they say, for example, the apparent meaning of Quran. If they see it is in contradiction with the apparent meaning of Quran, they just refuse it. If it is in contradiction with the Mashhur Sunnah, in that sense, Mashhur Sunnah is a Sunnah that became famous in the second generation, in the age of Tabi'un, in the successors' time. So during that time, if something became very famous, which means accepted by the entire Ummah, so it became the basis of the Ummah, a kind of understanding that is common in Mutawatir. So they say it became Mutawatir if a solitary report is in contradiction with anything Mutawatir or anything with Mashhur, then we refuse them. That's why they, for example, did not accept certain reports that Shafi school actually is based on. And also they...
So what is the impact? Then how Hanafi was impacted by Shafi?
Yes. So what happened was, after Shafi and let's say the canonization of hadith works, compilations, not only Shafi, but Shafi did a lot of impact, had a lot of impact, but also other scholars of Al-Hadith. They had the impact in the 3rd Hijri century. And there are certain claims that who actually was responsible in traditionalization of Ahlul Ray. And what I found out is probably the best candidate is At-Tahawi. Tahawi was first Shafi'i. He is nephew of Al-Muzani. Al-Muzani was a disciple of Shafi'i. So Tahawi first was Shafi'i, then converted to Hanafi, so became a Hanafi person. And he actually traditionalized Hanafi thinking. If we go back, we found him in submitting the filtering, let's say, methods of solitary reports of Ahl Hadith. So he basically injected that filtering method to the legal thought of Hanafis. So after that, so he lived in the 3rd Hijri century and some of 4th Hijri century. So after him, we see that Hanafi school was affected a lot. Not immediately, but a century later, for example, we see many Hanafis do not even cite the Kitab al-Athar of Abu Yusuf. Do not even cite Kitab al-Asar of Shaybani. They cite only, for example, Bukhari. They cite only, for example, Muslim. But they do not look at the founding books of that school. That is very interesting phenomenon. And what was the impact? The impact, I do not say that, you know, Hanafi legal thought completely changed, but it changed a lot. It changed and it submitted to the solitary reports. They, to put it more precisely, later Hanafis tried to reinterpret Hanafi legal thought based on solitary reports. If there's a contradiction, they followed solitary reports. Not so the Hanafi founding ideas, founding opinions.
So that is the completely opposite.
Exactly.
The first generation Hanafis, they did not accept solitary report, and the later generation Hanafis has submitted and accepted without any scrutiny the solitary reports found in Bukhari and Muslim and the other Siyasitta.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what happened. Well, I'm not saying the founding figures did not accept solitary report completely. They accepted, but they did not see themselves bound by solitary reports.
Okay.
They accepted them as evidence. Okay. They followed the evidence if it is in parallel with their usul.
Okay.
So that was the main distinction. So this happened actually after the 3rd Hijri century for the entire Ummah.
If I can summarize,
yeah.
that first generation's Hanafis did not accept Qabr Wahid or solitary report if it did not conform with their usul.
Correct.
But the later generation's Hanafis were more lenient or accepting solitary hadith, even if it does not go with the
Hanafi usul. Exactly. So they changed a little bit the Hanafi usul actually, especially in accepting the solitary reports.
Yes. So it is it means that they are accepting a Shafi Mustalah or Ahl al-Hadith.
In a way, you can say that. But we also need to see the other side of the change, which happened actually in Ahl Hadith. Ahl Hadith also was forced to become closer to the thinking of Ahl Ray. So this change is two-sided. The Ahl Hadith scholars also, for example, had to accept the validity of qiyas. They were reluctant if they did not.
And the qiyas was developed by the Hanafis.
Of course.
Especially Imam Abu Hanifa.
Yes, and Shafi accepted it as the only way for ijtihad. This is the only way according to Shafi'i. And other scholars of Al-Hadith had to follow that. So they could not reject it. Except certain scholars such as Dawud al-Zahiri scholars, they remained to reject qiyas analogy, but other than them, other scholars of Ahl Hadith, they completely submitted to the validity of qiyas. That was the other side of the change. But in together, what we see is Hanafi legal thought significantly was affected and influenced by the filters, let's say, conditions of filtering Sultan reports toward the Ahl Hadith.
Yeah, so there is a claim by some people in the field of academicians that Imam Shafi is the father of Usul al-Fiqh. But what we can see is that Imam Abu Hanifa and his students has followed a particular school of thought. So Imam Abu Hanifa has established a school of thought of Usul al-Fiqh. But why some people are now claiming that Risala is the first book of Usul al-Fiqh and Imam Shafi is the founding father of Usul al-Fiqh? Why is that?
Well, the thing is, the first work that was written on Usul al-Fiqh coming to us is written by Shafi'i. However, this is actually a big discussion in the academia right now, and there are some certain very valuable contributions to the discussion. But what we can see, even from the works of Shafi'i himself, in the Risala, in Jama' al-Ilm, in Kitab al-Umm, when he talks about anything related to Usul al-Fiqh, he is on the side of responding to the arguments that are already established.
Established by the Hanafis.
By Hanafis, well, not Hanafis, by Ahl Ray members, let's say, Mu'tazilis, Murji'is, and the circle of Ahl Ray. So these people were the founders of Usul al-Fiqh. And Shafi'i was on the position of responding to them. For example, take the topic of Ijma'.
Right.
When he talks about Ijma', he, for example, has an imaginative or an actual interlocutor from Iraq, and he debates with him, and he says, you claim that Ijma' is existing, but how about that? And so he asks questions to his interlocutor. Yes, and Ahl Ray. So it shows that Ijma' was actually a doctrine developed by Ahl Ray.
So it seems that he was basically responding to the Hanafi or Ahlul Rai school of Usul al-Fiqh. Yes?
Yes, correct.
So okay. So the next question, and we'll finish after that question. There is a new trend going on in the name of Maqasid al-Sharia. We know it was developed by Imam Shatibi, who belongs to Maliki school. So what we know from the Hanafi scholars, that Hanafi has got the similar sort of tools in deriving fatwa in the to deal with the new situations. But nowadays we see that the Maqasid al-Sharia is predominant. So what is your view on that? That whether Hanafi has really got tools, or what are the tools, and how Hanafis can go, go side by side with the Maqasid al-Sharia, and what is the way forward for the Ummah incorporating Hanafi school, Maqasid al-Sharia, and to deal with the modern challenges?
Well, Hanafis, and actually, to be fair, all schools of law, all scholars of law, actually had the idea of maslahah, because the idea goes back to why God, let's say, had some rulings for people. The main idea is the root goes back to the idea that God wants our benefit. So he gives us rulings because of our benefit. So also Hanafis developed certain tools as a method that is closely linked to the idea of maslaha and maqasid, which was, for example, take the topic of qiyas, analogy, the topics, discussions on illah, and especially the munasaba in illah, actually related to the maslaha, the maqasid of sharia.
So you want to say illah and munasaba is akin to maslaha theory of maqasid al-sharia.
Exactly, exactly. Because if you don't take that way, you cannot have the full picture. And also for the maqasid, it has a long history. Even before Shatibi, the recent studies show that fairly. For example, Qafal al-Shashi from Shafi'is, and later even Jassas had some clues for the maqasid, direct hints, and Juwayni also from Ash'ari school. So even before Shatibi, the idea on maqasid al-Sharia was very important. Of course, Shatibi had a considerable, significant contribution to the topic, but before him, in all schools, to a certain extent, the idea of maslaha al-masalih al-mursala, and in relation to it, maqasid al-sharia, was actually alive. So,
what about the istihsan? Is it the special tool invented by Maliki school, or there is some similar sort of tool in Hanafi school as well?
Of course, it was common between the schools, but if we look at the first works, for example, let's say Muwatta or Al-Mudawwana from Malikis, and from Hanafis, take the Zahir al-Riwaya books from compiled by Shaybani, Jami al-Kabir, Jami al-Saghir, and other Kitab al-Asl, al-Mabsut. If you look at them, very frequently Shaybani uses the term istihsan. So he uses the term istihsan very frequently, more than any other early Maliki scholar. So the term and istihsan basically is based on the idea of maslaha. If a rule, a general rule, or a general text even, does not establish the objective of the lawgiver, then we'll leave it and we go to another solution which is based on another evidence, which is based on another proof. That is basically istihsan, and you can see that, you know, the idea.
So in summary, what we can get from you is that before the Maliki schools developed the Maqasid al-Sharia,
yeah,
in Hanafi school, which is the earliest Usul al-Fiqh school, yeah, they have developed istihsan, yes, as Shaybani has used a lot this term, and they have developed illah, they have developed munasaba. So these are the tools available before Imam Shatibi.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So what is the way forward for the Ummah to deal with the challenges we are facing now? How Hanafi Madhab, Maliki Madhab, or any school of thought can contribute, and what is the problem with accepting solitary report to deal with these modern challenges?
Well, I think what we should do right now is we should go a long way to again discuss a method for understanding and using these solitary reports. So the old way of looking at if something is in Bukhari and Muslim, that's good, that's fine, it's not working anymore. So what we should do is, looking back what happened between, you know, Ahl al-Ray and Ahl al-Hadith, how did they contribute to the discussion? We benefit from all these discussions and need to develop a new approach to all these solitary reports at hand. Of course, we also use that, you know, we could not equalize what is existing in Al-Bukhari and what is existing in, let's say, a very weak source of hadith. Of course, it has some impact, but still we cannot easily just go with the what paradigm created by Ibn Hajar, for example. So we need to develop a new method, and this method has a lot to benefit from what early Hanafis developed, actually. So this عرض, the method of عرض الحديث على القرآن، عرض الحديث على المشهور سنة مشهورة، عرض الحديث على العموم بلوى. So we benefit a lot from all these methods in shaping our approach toward hadith or toward reports, solitary reports, and this will probably change a lot.
Okay, so finally, Umum al-Balagha principle, yes?
Yes.
Developed by the Hanafis,
Yes.
in testing hadith, linaqd al-hadith. So how it is very useful to us? I mean, some people are saying, okay, there is a hadith in Bukhari, we must accept this. If you do not accept this, you are rejecting hadith, you are rejecting Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how we can reconcile with that? Some people are coming with solitary hadith from Bukhari and Muslim.
Yes.
Now you are coming with the principle, though the principle was with the Hanafi before, Umum al-Balagha.
Yes.
So what is the way forward?
So, for example, Hanafis did not follow the reports that claim that the Prophet, peace be upon him, raised his hands when he was coming back from ruku and going to sajda, for example. And this hadith exists both in Bukhari and Muslim. But Hanafis, all of us, do not follow it. Why? Because Hanafis say, because if it was correct, we should have that narration from many different tariqs.
It should have been mutawatir.
It should have been, even if
Or
it's not
mashhur.
mutawatir, it should have been mashhur.
Right.
But it is not, because there are many companions who visited and stayed and died in Kufa, in Iraq, but they did not follow that. They did not apply that. So it shows that we do not accept that prophetic, that solitary report, and we go with what is, let's say, more realistic in their mind, which is against Umum al-Balwa. So that principle can be also applied in our approach toward the solitary report.
Thank you very much. We have been really benefited.
I
In
hope
future,
so.
we will come back to you, inshallah.
I hope so. Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity.